Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Rob. Welcome to the Kinetic Rugby League channel. I am finally back with NRL content. It is good to be back, folks. But just to quickly let you know of a few things happening this year. Firstly, I'm doing NRL Fantasy for the first time. So if you want to join the mini league that I've set up, the information to join is in the description of this video. Make sure you get in there. I want as many people as possible. That will be referenced in my predictions videos. And also with the predictions videos this year, I'm going to be doing a predictions league, which I'll be involved in with you guys. And all you have to do to join that is put your predictions in the comments of my predictions videos. And I'll track them every week and keep a list of a ladder, a leaderboard of how well we're all doing. That's new stuff coming this year. Make sure you get involved. But for this season preview, I'm going to be going through transfers in and transfers out. They're all accurate at time of recording. Some might change. Anything could happen at this point, really. Who knows? It's Rugby League. And I'll be going through my thoughts on last year for each team and what could happen this year and a few of the individuals throughout the sides as well. So without further ado, let's get on with the first team in this season preview. Kicking things off, we have the Brisbane Broncos. Let's start with the players they've lost and the players they've gained. For players out, the list includes Tyson Smoothie, Selwyn Cobbo, Jock Madden, Kobe Hetherington, Israel Leota, Fletcher Baker and Cody Black. For players in, the list includes Grant Anderson, Tom Duffy and Oblix Tower. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give them a 4 out of 10. They've lost a handful of guys that are good for depth, so there's no major losses to the first team. Selwyn Cobbo wasn't really playing that much last year anyway, so that's kind of fine, at least towards the back end of the year. And then with Grant Anderson, Tom Duffy and Tower, they can be good for depth too. So in terms of excitement, there's not really much. Anderson might get to feature, but we will see. It's only a 4 out of 10 for me. Now, the Broncos go into the season as reigning champions, which could mean there's more pressure to compete again this year, but with leaders like Adam Reynolds, Ben Hunt and Patrick Carrigan in the squad, you'd imagine they'll be able to keep the right kind of mindset. They also have some decent rotational options in the backline, which could be a huge help later down the line in case of injuries. Anderson is assumed to be starting, but Brisbane have Arthurs and Karapani available as well, all three of which can play wing or centre. Also, the Broncos did have to deal with some adversity in the spine as well. We saw a few guys moving around. We know Walsh can play in the halves as well if needed. Walters put in a decent shift there too. And then, of course, Reynolds, Mam and Hunt can rotate in the halves when they're needed. But the forward pack looks decent again this season. Jensen is typically reliable and hardworking. Tolty and Willison off the bench could do a decent job this year. Same with Takora as well. Let's see what he offers this year. But as always, the star of the pack is Payne Haas. To many, the best prop in the game, which I personally agree with. With him in the side, there's always the potential to bully teams through the middle. I'll move on to the players on the edges though. There's Ricky and Staggs on the right, Piakora and Shibasaki on the left. On the right, both Ricky and Staggs are skillful guys, but they're such powerful ball runners as well. They've partnered each other for a few years now. There's a good rapport there, and they can certainly do some damage this season, connecting with Reynolds on the right-hand side, and whoever starts on their wing as well. On the left, Piakora has grown massively as a player recently. He's a strong runner, and he's quite mobile as well. Outside of him is Shibasaki, who kind of came out of nowhere for me last season. He's very calm and skillful at centre, who thrives under pressure as well, which we saw in big games last season and in State of Origin. He never looked out of place for the Broncos at all. Also, defensively, he is very reliable. He'll most likely have Mariner outside of him, who's also a typically reliable winger or even centre, but he looked great at the Pacific Championships last year, and he could put up some decent numbers in 2026. That left edge will be helped out by Ezra Mam, who went through some legal troubles between 2024 and 2025, missing the first 9 rounds last year, but when he came back in, he kind of looked unfazed. There were a lot of fans against him, understandably, but week in, week out, he just kind of kept performing. His run game is very dangerous, and at his best, he can open up any defence. Then you throw Reece Walsh into the mix, who can attack either edge. The Broncos look like an elite offensive side on paper again. Towards the back end of last season, Walsh was the best player in the world by a good margin as well. He's a threat from anywhere on the field. He also has a decent kicking game as well, which is actually a lot better than a lot of other halfbacks in the league. But the Broncos now look like a team that can deal with adversity as well, which is huge for an entire season. My only hope for them is that this year they improve at least a little bit in defence. I have no doubts about their attack, but can they stop teams from putting up early points, putting the Broncos on the back foot, forcing them to make comebacks later on, which they can do, but sometimes it is going to be a little bit too much. Given how good this squad is, I can't see them dropping off massively. I think the only thing that would derail their season is having major injuries. I still expect them to be near the top of the ladder again, competing for more trophies. So for a floor, I'm going to give them 5th place, just with other teams getting a little bit better on paper, I think, and the possibility they might not be as good this year. But for a ceiling, I think they could easily be 1st again and take another trophy. Next up, we have the Canberra Raiders. Let's take a look at the players that they've lost and the guys they've brought in. For players out, the list includes Jamal Fogarty, Pasami Saulo, Trey Mooney, Danny Levi, Alba Hapawate, Jordan Martin, Adam Cook, and Manaya Wateri. For players in, the list includes Jaden Brayley, Sione Finau, Dane Laurie, and Kobe Black. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give the Raiders a 4 out of 10. Now, there's a few guys that aren't major misses. In terms of like Saulo, Mooney, Levi, Hapawate, they're decent players that could contribute, but aren't really that necessary in the short or even long term for the Raiders. Jamal Fogarty is a massive miss though, but bringing in guys like Jaden Brayley and Dean Laurie in particular, they're good for rotation. It's not a great transfer window. Again, Fogarty is a big miss, but there's a couple guys they've brought in that are good for rotation, and they've lost a few guys that weren't that important anyway. Now, the Raiders are still a side that has quality all over. They have players throughout that aren't considered best in position, but are all great in position, which is what makes them such a threat again this year. The spine is slightly different this season, losing Fogarty, who is a big loss as mentioned, but Ethan Sanders will be stepping up to take the number 7 jersey. He's got some decent New South Wales Cup experience, scoring a handful of tries and contributing with assists in the past few years. I believe he has some, but very little NRL experience. It might take him some time to kind of offer what Fogarty could, but he wouldn't be the new number 7 if he wasn't at least trusted. He'll be alongside Ethan Strange in the halves, who's grown so much in such a short space of time at such a young age as well. He's already a big game and big moment player. But so is Kale Weeks. Both of those guys can create chances from nothing with their step and with their pace. Now, rounding out the spine is Tom Starling. He had a fantastic year last year, plenty of great carries from dummy half, and was also looking to be available from offloads constantly. But a lot of that was helped massively by having such a dominant forward pack. Horsburgh, Tarpany and Papali'i were so important last season. They'll be just as important this year as well, but I think they'll be able to play up to the same level again, which is really important. They drag multiple defenders and also know how to get an offload as well, especially Joseph Tarpany. Towards the edges, Young and Hosking are both very reliable options. Hosking is a workhorse on both sides of the ball, and Young is a major threat with his lead runs and with the ball in hand. I would love to see Matty Nicholson work his way back into the side again this year. He was doing so well last year before his injury and was really putting himself in the conversation for the England Ashes squad. But of course, let's see what he can do this year. But the backline is unchanged this season, which is good news. All 4 are exciting with ball in hand. I didn't know anything about Savelia Tamale at the start of last season, but he was consistently reliable in the corner and wasn't too bad in the air either. Timoko is also a very agile player. He's such a threat for long-range tries too. Even if he's got the ball in hand 20 metres from the line and that defensive line looks set, he's so elusive, he could still find the try line. Then there's Chris on the opposite side, who was one of the most informed centres in the first half of last season. His carries and decision-making was class, but throughout the year, he was still putting in regularly solid shifts. But finally, Xavier Savage, bags of pace and a great finisher in the corner. That back line can cause a lot of problems again this year. But for the Raiders, I want to end with the bench, the relief team, because they all seem to maintain the standard that the starting 13 set every week. Owen Patty is growing into a really exciting young hooker. Josh Papali'i was starting mostly last season, and it was Smithies coming off the bench. Either of them will get stuck in at 13. I don't know who will be starting most of this season. Both of them will be fine starting or coming off the bench. Mariota would run hard every carry and look like a handful to deal with, but Simi Sasangi could be a real problem for teams this season. Coming off the bench, I think he can be really annoying. He's a strong ball carrier, actually has a decent step, and decent bit of acceleration too. I think he could be used in a few different ways this season as a bit of a talisman or game changer. He's got a little bit of everything, and I think he could be really important off the bench this season. But overall, this team has quality all over. It might be a little bit tougher to control games without Fogarty's kicking game there, I understand that, but at the very least, Sanders will be getting a full preseason as the starting 7, plus he'll get regular minutes week in, week out to improve, which is huge for him and the Raiders. This is a side that, as I said, can create chances from anywhere on the park, but they can also let momentum swing very easily, but at the very least, they have the quality to force it to swing back in their favour. Now, of course, the loss of Jamal Fogarty is huge for the Raiders, but at the very least, I still expect the rest of that squad to make the Raiders a good to possibly great team once again. They knew how to deal with adversity. They were great in comeback situations. We'll just have to see how they can deal with the change in the spine this year, but I still back them to do quite well. So for a floor, I'm going to go with 7th, and for a ceiling, I'm going to go with 3rd place. Next up, we have the Canterbury Bulldogs. Let's take a look at the players that they've lost and the players they've gained. For players out, the list includes Toby Sexton, Reid Marnie, Blake Taaffe, Curtis Morin, Blake Wilson, Luke Smith, and Joseph O'Neill. For players in, the list includes Leo Thompson, Cade Dykes, Fletcher Baker, Sean O'Sullivan, and Gordon Chan-Kum-Tong. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give the Bulldogs a 6.5 out of 10. Now, they have lost some pretty important guys there in terms of Toby Sexton and Reid Marnie. Blake Taaffe and Curtis Morin, Blake Wilson, they're good for rotation. I actually quite like Blake Wilson, to be honest. But with the players they brought in, they needed a little bit more size, and they've got that with Leo Thompson. That's what they needed. And I think Sean O'Sullivan is a good rotational option. He can play at 9 if needed, can play in the halves, maybe a little bit at 13. I think he's a good squad option, and so is Gordon Chan-Kum-Tong for just injecting him in the squad if and when needed. So 6.5 out of 10. But to give the Bulldogs a preview, I wasn't a fan of what the Bulldogs did last season, especially regarding Sexton and Marnie. They had a side that was capable of becoming premiers, but they wanted to force Galvin, an unproven halfback by the way, into the side, just to push Sexton out. Once they did that, they got worse and didn't recover. At the very least, they could have kept Galvin just somewhere in the squad, just out of the way, and only use Galvin when absolutely needed if there was an injury and they had to rotate. I didn't like what they did at all, and it backfired, and to me, they got what they deserved. Now, for this season, as far as things go long term, it might work out. Galvin is already familiar with the players around him and how Serraldo wants to play. He now gets a full preseason under his belt with this side, and as an older player with more experience, he could be huge this season. He's also alongside Burton, who's been massively underrated league-wide for years now. At the very least, if Galvin is taking time to adjust, Burton can steady the ship with his kicking game, and he's got a fairly solid run game too. But I'm looking forward to seeing how Bailey Hayward actually gets on this season, because he showed a lot of his value last year. He can play in the halves at 13, or come off the bench as the hooker to have an impact. But this season, he's expected to start at 9, which is great for him and the Bulldogs. I think he's a pretty talented player. I think he'll be a constant threat, and as I just mentioned, he's also great for rotation as well. They can swap Hayward and man between 9 and 13 during games if needed. But the options out wide are actually unchanged, which is helpful for both sides of the ball. They're already a fairly strong attacking side. I think they need a little bit of improvement there, but with individuals like Kiraz, Cherry and Crichton in particular, individually they can come up with huge moments. Add the back rowers to that as well in Preston and Kickow. Both are strong ball carriers, mobile and important for offloads, which also unlocks Connor Tracy, who's been very reliable at number 1 for the Bulldogs in both attack and defence. But with the Bulldogs forwards, I do think they were lacking in that area last year. They aren't a whole lot bigger, but of course adding Leo Thompson to that pack does add size. Max King was exceptional in the first half of the season. He didn't look as impactful after State of Origin, but could be good again this year. Thompson adds much needed punch through the middle though. The Bulldogs also have hard workers off the bench and throughout the squad, but I think the impact that Satili Tupanua could have this year is huge. Like I said about Simi Sasangi for the Raiders, Tupanua could be that kind of guy for the Bulldogs. Now, Canterbury have been a fantastic defensive side for the past 2 years now, and I see no reason why they couldn't be just as good, if not even better this year. With regular pieces still in there as well, that makes it possible. And with one of the best defensive players in the game in Stephen Crichton, he could have his edge locked down for most of the year. When it comes to the Bulldogs, defence is likely going to be one of the main reasons why they'll be such a strong team again this year. But as mentioned, with the inclusion of guys like Thompson and with Galvin, Thompson through the middle is going to be huge. Galvin in the spine is going to get more time to develop there, with Burton and Tracy. I think with the rest of the squad, especially on the edges, being the same again, they can develop their partnerships in defence and stay just as strong and build more connections offensively as well, which could make them even stronger this year. So for a floor, I'm going to go with 5th place, and for ceiling, I'm going to go with 1st. Next up, we have the Cronulla Sharks. Let's take a look at the absolute plethora of players they've lost and gained. For players out, the list only includes Daniel Atkinson and Cade Dykes, and for players in, the list includes absolutely nobody. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give the Sharks a 3 out of 10. Some people might think it's a 1 or a 0 because they didn't bring anyone in. For me, they didn't actually need to bring anyone in. I think their squad is still quite strong anyway. And in terms of players out, they only lost Atkinson and Dykes, and I don't think they were that important long-term for the Sharks. They're not major misses, so 3 out of 10 is fine for me. Now, going into 2026, the Sharks have a squad that I think is capable of going all the way. I really like how they're built. They've got a big forward pack, which includes one of the best props in the game, who is also capable of scoring tries between the sticks in Adam Fanua-Blake. Another forward that I was very impressed with last season as well was Thomas Hazelton. He was an impact player off the bench, but towards the back end of the season, he reached a different level, in my opinion. He's not listed in the strongest team here, but if I was picking the lineup, he's in there for sure. And I really like Talakai as well. He's great for versatility, whether he's needed at centre, in the back row, or in the front row off the bench. He's got a lot to offer this season, as well as Hazelton. But the Sharks also have an exciting group of backs. The back line is full of speed and quality. Both wingers are fantastic in the air and great finishers in the corner. They've also got Stone Street coming through as well, who looked really comfortable and competent last season. And at centre, I think Jesse Ramian actually hit another level as well in 2025. His ability to get leverage on his opposite centre and break lines was huge last season. And then Kale Iro on the opposite side has been improving year on year in both attack and defence. He looks really comfortable on that side. In the spine, Will Kennedy was showing some incredible form last year. If he was picked for State of Origin, it would have made complete sense to me. The halves will be Trindle and Hines paired together again. Both are top players with kicking games and run games, and both have killer passes as well. They get another preseason together to keep developing their partnership with Kennedy at 1 as well. Then you have Blake Brayley in the spine at 9. He hit new heights last season. I don't think he was picked for State of Origin, if I remember correctly, but he was at least selected for the Australian Ashes squad. Let's see if he takes another step up this year. Now, the Sharks are a typically reliable defensive side. They can certainly have their ups and downs, but throughout a season, on average, they're usually quite trustworthy in defence. Offensively, they've got threats all over. They can score long-range tries. They can break defences open with shape. They're good in the air, as I mentioned, and they can crash over through the middle. I just want to see a little bit more consistency from them on both sides of the ball. They've got a squad capable of beating anyone at their best. It's just about producing that or staying close to their best for most of the season. Easier said than done, of course, but I think they've got the squad to do it. As mentioned, for the Sharks, it's about consistency. I think there have been too many dips from the Sharks in recent years. They can beat anyone when they're at their best, but when they're in form, they are hard to beat. They have a team that is capable, on paper. I think they are built to go all the way. It's just about maintaining that consistency. Can they also build those partnerships? They haven't changed much in the side, at least the starting side, much of the bench. They could be really strong this year. It's just about finding the right form. So for a floor, I'm going to go with 5th place. And for ceiling, I'm going to go with 1st. Next up on the list, we have the Dolphins. Let's take a look at the players that they've lost and the players they've gained. For players out, the list includes Josh Kerr, Mark Nichols, Kenny Bromwich, Harrison Graham, Max Fierney, Oblix Tower, James Walsh, Sean O'Sullivan, and Ryan Jackson. For players in, the list includes Morgan Knowles, Selwyn Cobbo, and Brad Schneider. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give the Dolphins a 7 out of 10. Now, they did lose Kerr, Nichols, Bromwich, Graham. They were important for the forward pack, but I think they've still got some decent size in there anyway. Plus, the inclusion of Knowles is pretty good. They've lost some guys for rotation in the backs as well, but you got Selwyn Cobbo there, who I'll talk about in a minute, and Brad Schneider, both are good for rotation. So 7 out of 10 for the Dolphins. Now, this is the Dolphins' 4th year in the NRL, and they're still without a finals appearance. Some might say that's not a big deal, considering how long some other teams have actually been waiting to get into the top 8, but with the squads that the Dolphins have had since they came into the league, I think they probably should have made the finals at least once by now, and it's a little bit disappointing that they haven't. But they are stacked with quality players all over. I want to start with their pack, though, because they did lose a few experienced players up front, as I mentioned, but if you look at the guys they have, with Saifiti, Flegler, Plath, Gilbert, Knowles, Kafusi, Molo, Stone, Keeley, and Finafewaki, that's a big and mobile pack that can get stuck into the grind. I really hope Flegler can stay fit this season. When I saw him for the Broncos a few years back, he was quality there. And for the Dolphins, he could be a huge presence through the middle. I didn't like how many forwards they lost, but with the guys they have left, I think they're fine. And of course, Morgan Knowles is a new addition from St Helens in Super League. A lot of Aussies would have seen him for the first time in the Ashes, and on social media, a lot of Aussies seem to be quite impressed with him. That's what he does every week. With Knowles, I can guarantee that the Dolphins are getting a workhorse in defence. He's made for making 40 plus tackles every week. He's never shying away from carries. He's working his backside off. He is a non-stop player through the middle. Given how St Helens play, they rely on their forwards a lot to get them up the field. I haven't seen that much of his technical ability or ball handling. I've not seen that much of him over the past few years, just because of how St Helens play. They like to bulldoze teams through the middle, but I'm sure he'll be able to pick that up very, very quickly. But switching to the backs, the Dolphins look so exciting. Maybe the most exciting group of backs in the league. Possibly. They're at least in the conversation for me. Tabai Fidau has been getting better every single year. He's a speed demon and one of the best support runners in the game. On the wing, they have Isako and Cobo, which is harsh for Bostock, who actually looks like he could start for anyone. But you can't really drop Isako. And if they can get Cobo at his best, he could do some freaky stuff for the Dolphins like he used to do for the Broncos. They also have Avarillo at centre, who's got tons of pace. He's another centre that's capable of creating chances by himself and getting leverage around the outside of his opposite centre. And they also have Farnworth on the other side. To many, the best centre in the game. At the very least, he's top two with Stephen Crichton. Farnworth is also getting better every single year. He's got pace, he's got skill, he's solid in defence as well, and he knows how to break open set defensive lines. The back five for the Dolphins will be a nightmare for a lot of teams. But in the halves, we're going to see Nikorima and Katoa there again. Nikorima is solid nearly every single week. He's got a really strong run game and a short kicking game as well. Isaiah Katoa is another player that's getting better every single year. His ability to control games is clearly improving. He looks like he's in charge and wants the ball in his hands to create opportunities. Even then, he's very intelligent and can be a little bit unorthodox sometimes, but he just makes it work. Now, if I remember correctly, the Dolphins had some injury problems last season. I can't fully remember how bad it was, but I do think they had some problems there. And they did have plenty of drops in form, of course. But midway through to late in the season, they managed to hit a different level, smashing teams for a few weeks, actually. But throughout the year, they had some defensive lapses. So, of course, consistency is key for them this year. But they are very well equipped for this season, given how many players can actually rotate. Tabai Fidau can play fullback, centre and wing. Avarillo can play wing, centre, fullback and 5/8. Cobo can play centre, wing and fullback. Donahue has also been getting better every year as well. He'll be good for rotation at 9, and he's got decent experience at 13 at this point, and can play in the halves if needed. Fuller is a very solid option at fullback. Schneider can fill in the halves, and they've got Bostock, Lemuelu available in the backs as well. Plus, all of the forwards I mentioned earlier that they can rotate up front. That stands them in really good stead for the season. But they've got to make the finals this season or something kind of needs to change. I am really excited about the Dolphins this season. I think they're stacked all over. They've got experience to lead the way, and they've got young players that are already great and still developing. They'll just keep getting better and better. But it is time to see them in the finals at this point. So, for a floor, I'm going to go with 9th, because I think they will at least compete for the playoffs again. And for a ceiling, I think they could, based on the squad they've got, get as high as 4th. Next up, we have the Gold Coast Titans. Let's take a look at the players they've lost and the players they've gained. For players out, the list includes Isaac Farsumalawi, David Fafita, Kieran Foran, Tom Weaver, Sean Mullaney, Jacob Alec-Vinker, Ryan Foran, Ben Liu, Harley Smith-Shields, Regan Campbell-Gillard, Carter Gordon, Alafiana Khan-Pereira and Brian Kelly. For players in, the list includes Luke Summerton, Lachlan Ilias, Curtis Morin and Max Fiene. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give the Titans a 2 out of 10. Now, there's a sort of argument to be made in terms of why this could be a good window and a bad transfer window. The reason why it could be seen as a good window is because the Titans have been a shocking team for the last few years. So shifting out a lot of the regulars could be a good move. I understand that as a potential argument, but in terms of players they brought in, it's nobody of significance that's going to majorly change this team. Summerton, Ilias, Morin and Fiene, they're not going to change the makeup of this team. It's just not. They've lost a lot of key players that can contribute to a good side anywhere in the league, including the Titans. And for guys they brought in, I don't think they're going to have a real impact. So for me, it's a 2 out of 10. Now, the Titans have struggled a lot in the past few years. They have also been hit with injuries, which hasn't helped, but even when they've been settled, they haven't been able to do much either. I do think the team that's listed here, the strongest lineup, is good enough to take on most teams, but they're going to need to be at their absolute best. There's a lot of players here that I like. I think Fionney, Sammy and Fafita are reliable enough players in the back line, but they don't really wow me. Aside from a few things I've seen from Fafita, he's got some decent pace. But then there's Brimson and Campbell, who are good players in the halves, but they've not really been able to show too much as partners. But with a pre-season together, they might be able to hit another level this season, which would be huge. But regular viewers of my channel, or my NRL content, will know that Keanu Kinney is my favourite player in the NRL by a country mile. I think he's absolute class. I just love him. I think he's great. And if he can stay healthy all year, he could really elevate this Titans side. His return carries are great. He's such a threat from anywhere on the field. He works his backside off. I just love him. He's great. But swiftly moving on, the forwards they could start with look pretty good, with Fotuaika and Tina Farsumalawi, two State of Origin props with plenty of experience, but both are strong ball carriers and are fairly mobile as well. They have the potential to win most battles up front early on. Coming off the bench will be guys like Haas, Morin and Jolliffe, who can all put in a shift, but I'm really excited for Cooper Bye this season. I saw him for the first time last year for PNG in the Pacific Championships, and he really impressed me. Strong ball carrier, can drag multiple defenders, and could be a real threat inside the 10. As I said though, the Titans really need to be at their best to compete with most teams. I like a lot of the individuals here, but as a unit, they haven't really been putting it together, which is a bit of a concern for me. That might help offensively sometimes, because they've got individuals that can create chances themselves, but that won't always be enough. So it depends on how well they can move the ball around as a team. They were 11th overall in attack last season, which isn't terrible, but it does need some work. But defensively, they were garbage. They were by far the worst team in the league in terms of defence, conceding 719 points. That is 29.95 points per game. You cannot be conceding 30 points per game on average. That is awful. But I'm not sure how much better they'll be this year. When it comes to the Titans, for me, as long as they can be at least slightly better in defence, that will go a long way to picking up more wins this season. I don't know if they're strong enough to be pushing for top 8. I did say I like some of the pieces dotted around this squad, and at their best they could take on most teams, but I don't think this is a side that's going to be at their best for that many weeks of the season. It will help them to stay in games for longer if they're at least a little bit better defensively. At least offensively, they've got good attacking options at the very least. They weren't terrible in attack last year. They can show up with these incredible games once in a blue moon, but we don't see that nearly enough. So for a floor, I'm going to go with 17th. For a ceiling, I'll go with 11th. Next up, we have the Manly Seagulls. Let's take a look at their transfer window of players out and players in. For players out, the list includes Dally Cherry-Evans, Lachlan Croker, Toa Sipley, Josh Allier, Raymond Taumalo Vega, Tommy Talau, Jazz Tavanga, Gordon Chankum Tong, Michael Cheekham, Dean Matteson, and Matt Lodge. For players in, the list includes Jamal Fogarty, Kobe Hetherington, Blake Wilson, and Zach Docker-Clay. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give them a 4.5 out of 10. Now, I do think there's some decent like-for-likes here. They've lost Cherry-Evans, brought in Fogarty. They've lost guys like Sipley and Allier, brought in Hetherington. They've lost guys like Talau and brought in Wilson, and then they've lost Croker and Chankum Tong and brought in Docker-Clay. I think there's decent like-for-likes, but there's a few other big guys and rotational options that could have contributed to their season. So it could have been a 5 because they've done some like-for-likes, but just a little bit less than a 5 because of how many other options they've lost that could have contributed. But like the Sharks, the Seagulls are another team that I think are genuinely built to go all the way. On paper, I think they've got the potential to do it. I think if you ask most Seagulls fans what their biggest problem is, though, I think they'd say their head coach. For me, I'm not sure he's getting the very best out of this squad. I think he's capable of getting this side into the finals, and they should be in the top 8 again. But let's get on to the starting lineup. They've got a very talented and experienced spine, with Simpkin, who'll be starting at 9. He's a decent player, but behind this pack, which I'll get on to soon, he could really shine. Then there's Luke Brooks. He has his doubters every year, and I can understand why, but I do think Manly do need more from him, mostly unlocking defences, but he is capable of it. We just need to see it more often. But with him this year in the halves is Jamal Fogarty, who I'm a big fan of. Yes, they've lost DCE, but Fogarty's kicking game, I think, is just as good in my opinion. He's got a short kicking game as well, and he's got a run game over DCE on top of it. Maybe what Brooks has been lacking, Fogarty can make up for. And then at fullback, they have Tom Trbojevic. At his best, he's one of the best fullbacks in the game. He's had so many injuries over the past few seasons, and that's really hindered him and Manly. If he can stay healthy and find his form, he can elevate the Seagulls this season to another level. They'll have Hopewarte on the wing this season, but he's shown that he's also reliable at fullback too. So if they want to rotate those guys, they can put Trbojevic at centre, Hopewarte at fullback, and Garrick on the wing. If they want to do it, they certainly could do. But the rest of the backs are full of pace as well. Garrick is actually one of my favourite players in the league. He can play at centre, on the wing, or at fullback. He's actually not a bad kicker as well when it comes to conversions. He's a no-nonsense player too. He'll get stuck in defensively, he'll give you multiple carries per set, and does a good job as well. He goes about his business professionally, effectively, and quietly. On the other side is Tolu Kula, one of the league's speedsters. I do want to see a little bit more from him this year in terms of creating chances by himself. He's got the pace to do it, but I want to see him getting around players and getting more line breaks this season. But outside of him is Jason Saab, possibly the fastest player in the league. He tends to have a few injuries as the year goes on, normally his hamstring, but at his best, he's a major weapon for Manly. He's a solid finisher, and given his height, he's really good in the air as well. But to move on to the forwards, Docker Clay is a new addition, and he is a very solid and reliable option off the bench at 9. We'll see what he can do this season for Manly. And the rotational options up front, in the front row, are massive too. Bullimore and Takiaho are decent props. If Takiaho plays with the right mindset, attitude, and stays healthy, he can drag multiple defenders. And Bullimore is fairly mobile. He can break tackles and get offloads as well. But with those guys, they can also bring on Nathan Brown, who's one of the strongest runners in the game. He doesn't always move defenders. He can just hit the wall and stop, but he'll give every carry his best run, which helps to keep worn down defenders as worn down as possible. But he'll go at every defender with everything for every carry. But I also like Taniela Paseka as well. He's a huge guy, a strong ball carrier, and he's still very young as well. He's great for long term for Manly. One final player to mention, though, is Hamal Alkuatu, one of the most dangerous back rowers in the game. He's a tank with ball in hand. He knows how to find the line from inside the red zone. He's also capable of getting offloads because he's so tough to get a hold of. I think he's going to have a great year once again. Like I said at the start, this is a team that I truly think is built to go all the way. I think given the size of the pack and the rotational options and the quality, the speed and skill in the backs, I think they are built the right way. I do agree they might need a head coach change if they underdeliver, which I think is not making the prelims. Anything less than that is not good enough for a team like this, in my opinion. But I also think the change at 7 kind of helps them to get out of their own way, which was being predictable. Sometimes, when they needed to be brave, the ball just went to DCE for a kick on the last tackle instead of going at teams. When they were behind and needed to find points, they thought set completion was the answer with 15 minutes to go. At least with Fogarty, he'll take risks when they're needed. You might say DCE is a better 7 than Fogarty. I understand that, but what I'm saying is I think Fogarty is a better fit for Manly. Now, I'll be honest, I used to love watching Manly. Like, during the COVID years, they look so free-flowing offensively. I used to love watching their attack. They are a real threat from long range with the amount of pace they've got in their backs. I hope they lean into that. I hope they really try and move the ball around early in the sets, go at teams on the edges. I really think they could do a lot of damage if they keep persisting and going at teams. They've got the pace and they've got the quality to do it, so I just hope they do. At their best, they can do some damage this season. Given what we've seen under this coach and a handful of these players usually having injuries at some point in the year, I think that could be an issue long term in terms of at least trying to push for a trophy this year. I think the squad is great, but given the amount of injuries and where this coach tends to get them, I'm not sure they can get all the way. I think they can have a good season, but it depends on staying healthy and can they at least make improvements on last year. So for me, the floor is 10th and the ceiling is 4th. Next up, we have the Melbourne Storm. Let's take a look at the players that they've lost and the players they've gained. For players out, the list includes Bronson Garlick, Grant Anderson, Nelson Asafa-Solomona, Dean Aramea, Jonah Pezzett, and Ryan Pappenhausen. For players in, the list includes Manaia Wateri, Jack Hetherington, Trent Tolau, and Davy Moale. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give the Storm a 4 out of 10. There are some guys that I don't think are huge misses, like Garlick, Anderson, and Aramea. But you have Jonah Pezzett, who was good for rotation and for long-term prospects. Ryan Pappenhausen is a major miss. And Nelson Asafa-Solomona, even though he didn't play a ton last season, I still think is a huge loss in terms of size through the middle. For the replacements, they brought in a couple forwards. I think that was one area that I actually wanted them to get a little bit bigger in. But the fact they haven't really replaced those guys in the backs in Pezzett, Anderson, and Pappenhausen is a slight concern, but I'm glad they've at least added a little bit more size. Of course, losing Pappenhausen was massive, but I do know that a lot of Storm fans are excited about Su'a-Fa'alogo. He's shown he's got speed, and he can do a decent job at fullback. We've seen a few young guys do a solid job at fullback in recent years. Lehigh Hopewate is one, Jai Gray is another. Can Fa'alogo do what they've done? We will see. Like I've said a fair bit already for other players, he's got a full pre-season as the assumed number 1, which will help him to get up to speed, especially in this spine as well. But even if it takes him some time to contribute what the Storm needs, Munster and Hughes is still the best halfback partnership in the league, in my opinion. Both have great kicking games and run games. In terms of creating chances, Storm will be fine. They've also got 2 tall wingers to kick to, in terms of Warbrick, who also provides decent carries out the backfield. It would be good to see him get a full season on the wing as well. And then there's Coates on the other side, to many the best winger in the game right now. He's certainly up there anyway. He's a real threat in the air. He can find the line in tight spaces and can do some freakish stuff as well, as we saw in plenty of games last season. Now, last year, I did have a slight issue with the pack. They were beaten through the middle a few times towards the back end of last season. Losing someone as big as Asafa-Solomona isn't great, but to be able to bring on Hetherington, Moale, and Kamikamica is huge for rotation. Now, I think King is a reliable and hard-working option to start up front, but I want to see Utakamanu being more dominant this season. And we always talk about the Storm and the grind, but they were losing a little bit more than usual last year. Now, I do like guys such as Blore, Lasati, and Liero. They're all hard workers. They get stuck in, and I cannot fault their efforts. But without Eli Katoa this season, I'm not sure they'll be as dangerous on the edges. Plus, Liero has been a bit of a penalty machine and has been making silly mistakes in good attacking positions. The Storm really need a professional and clinical season from him this year in particular. I'll end with 2 players. One can keep the Storm in any game. The other can change any game. The first is Harry Grant, the best hooker in Rugby League. The fact that he can get through 80 minutes, putting in 30 plus, sometimes 40 or even 50 plus tackles in a game, whilst maintaining the same level of energy from dummy half, is ridiculous. He is insane. The other player is Taron Wishart. I've been a big fan of him over the last few seasons. He can have a real impact in games off the bench, playing in the halves if needed, at 9 or at 13. He helps to keep the pace and energy in the Storm towards the back end of games. But as always, with Craig Bellamy as the head coach and the key players they've still got in the spine, I do expect the Storm to be near the top once again. When it comes to the Storm, of course we know they're a very reliable defensive side. They've got so much flair offensively as well, and they love to get stuck into the grind. I still stand by the statement that they lost some battles through the middle towards the back end of last year. They were quite disappointed in that area. I don't think they really competed well enough in a lot of games towards the back end of the season. I think the only things that could really hinder them this year would be possibly waiting for Su'a-Fa'alogo to get up to speed. That's one possibility, although I do have confidence that he's going to be fine this year at the very least. And they do tend to lose key players in periods, whether it be Munster, whether it be Hughes. I think Grant might have had a few stints out as well. Guys like Meany, Warbrick, these are huge players, important players that they might lose, that they have lost in periods of the season in the last few years. So we'll just have to see how that goes. But it's difficult to bet against the Melbourne Storm. So for a floor, I'm going to go with 5th from those negatives that I mentioned. And for a ceiling, I'm going to have to go with 1st. So next up, we have the Newcastle Knights. Let's take a look at the players that they've lost and the players that they've gained. For players out, the list includes Leo Thompson, Jaden Braley, Kai Pearce-Paul, Jack Cogger, Taj Annan, Tyrone Thompson, Jack Hetherington, Adam Elliott, and Jackson Hastings. For players in, the list includes Dylan Brown, Lachlan Crouch, Peter Holler, Pasami Salo, Matthew Hunter, Asu Kepoa, Harrison Graham, Trey Mooney, and Sandon Smith. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give them a 3.5 out of 10. It's kind of the same sort of idea as what I said with the Titans. They're getting a low rating because I don't think they've brought in enough players to replace the usual starters. But at the same time, because they've been such a poor team over the last few years, is it the right call getting rid of so many starters? The problem is I don't think they've replaced them with enough quality. So I'm going to give them a 3.5 out of 10. Now, the Knights finished last in 2025. They were ranked 15th in defence and 17th in attack. They were the worst attacking side by a mile. Now, like the Titans, I like a lot of the individuals here, but it's questionable what they'll produce as a team. On paper, they look really exciting in the backs. But that's it. There are a few guys in the forwards that I think will be fine, like Saifiti, Lucas, Frizzell, and Crosland. I do like Crosland at 9. They're all solid players, but I'm kind of underwhelmed by the rest of the options. I don't know how much damage they'll be able to do up front this season, and I'm a little bit worried about them. But to try to be positive, as I said, I like the group of backs. They've got quality players on paper and some decent rotational options as well. The spine does look good. Ponga is another player that can be the best in the league when he's at his absolute best. Hopefully he can stay healthy and find some serious form this season. He's a game changer. And when it comes to Sharp at 7, I like him. He's got a decent run game, but he's young and has plenty of room to grow. At the very least, the spine is fast. Very fast. And this year, they'll be adding Dylan Brown to the halves, the most expensive player in the league. In the past few years, I'll be honest, I've seen zero evidence that Brown is kind of worth it. Of all the options you could have looked at for that amount of money to be spent, Brown does not scratch the top 10 for me. But what has given me some serious confidence is how he played for New Zealand in the Pacific Championships. I named him my International Player of the Year after what he did in that campaign. He was in control of every game. He created so many chances, scoring his own tries or getting assists. He made great meters, had plenty of offloads, and created a ton of line breaks. If that's the version of Dylan Brown that the Knights are getting most weeks, he is absolutely worth that money. Now, the Knights did have to make some changes to the back line throughout the season due to injuries mostly, and in the halves as well, but their best back line looks pretty good with Young, Gagai, Best, and Marju. Young is one of the fastest guys in the league. He's a good finisher and he's good in the air as well. And he's great with his carries out the backfield. Gagai has loads of experience and is reliable on both sides of the ball. Bradman Best can be an absolute beast when he's at his best as well and healthy. He can cause a lot of problems by himself. And from what I've seen from Marju, he's not too bad in the air given his height. I don't think he's one of the fastest wingers in the league, but he does have something to offer. Newcastle also have some decent rotational options in the backs. As I've mentioned, James Schiller has shown he's a solid option on the wing. Fletcher Hunt isn't named on the squad list, but could feature again this season, and he did a pretty good job for a 20-year-old last year. They also have Gamble for the halves, who might not feature at all, but I think he's fine as a backup there for Newcastle. And then Sandon Smith is a new addition. He might be the relief hooker off the bench for most of this season, even though Crosland could do 80 minutes if needed. But Smith could inject some pace. I think his heads-up footy is decent, and his short kicking game isn't too bad either. Overall, I am a little bit concerned with the pack. They could have their issues up front this season, but I'm happy for Saifiti, Mooney, Frizzell, and a few of those others to really surprise me. I'm happy to be proven wrong. But at the very least, if they can get things clicking in the backs, they've got some good points in that team if they can get in good field position. But then, do they have a guy that can run the kicking game effectively enough? I'm not sure. When it comes to the Knights, though, I don't really know what side of their game they're going to be able to fall back on. It's not like, oh, they're a poor defensive side, but their attack gets them out of trouble. Or they're a poor attacking side, but they can restrict points. There's no real side to their game that they can fall back on. Now, they were a poor defensive side last year, but even worse offensively, yet their attacking options this season actually look decent, so I don't really know what we're going to get out of them. But with the pace they've got in the backs, let's hope that they can actually find some more points this year. I've got confidence that the backs will look a little bit better this year, at the very least, just a little bit better. But for floor, I'm going to go with 17th again. And for ceiling, if everything works out, I'll go with 12th. Next up, we have the New Zealand Warriors. Let's take a look at the players they've lost and the players they've gained. For players out, the list includes Moala Graham Taufa, Ed Cossey, Freddie Lussick, Bunty Afoa, Tom Arley, Kalani Going, and Morgan Harper. For players in, the list includes Alafiana Khan-Pereira, Jai Lanane, Morgan Gannon, and Hazen Mellors. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give them a 6.5 out of 10. I don't think they've lost anybody that's majorly important, short or long term, and they brought in two guys in particular, in Khan-Pereira and Gannon, that I think could make a real difference short and long term for the Warriors. I don't think this is too bad. They haven't lost anyone too important, but they brought in some pretty good options. So 6.5 out of 10 for the Warriors. Now, I'm really excited about the Warriors this season. I think there is a lot of potential to do something special this year, and there's still a lot of room for growth as well. They were hit with a lot of major injuries last season, which derailed their 2025 campaign, but they were competing for a top 4 spot before those injuries. But what they showed before that was exciting. Firstly, their pack is massive. Fisher, Harrison, Barnett starting is huge, and then being able to rotate guys like Ford, Niokore, Vaimanga is impressive. Niokore especially, I actually really like him. It means they'll always have size present on the field. Experienced guys as well that can drag multiple defenders. And in the back row, they have a mix of youth and experience. Both also have quality. Capewell has been around for ages and is always solid in defence and can offer good carries, plenty of offloads, and a calm head in attack as well. Halasima looks like a real star of the future as well. He's got a great mixture of size and speed with a decent step and offload. He could do some special things this season as well. And then at 13, they have Erin Clark. He was quality last season. He also made my international team of the season last year. He was a tank for New Zealand. His carries were fantastic. He got plenty of offloads and quick play the balls. He'll be a massive threat in this already stacked forward pack. Now in the backs, there's maybe two changes that I'd make about this team list put together by the NRL. Firstly, if they did swap out Watene Zelezniak for Taupiki, I'd be fine with that. It's not a must for me. I don't mind either way, in all honesty. But the other change that I think I would make, and they maybe should make, is swapping Nickel Kluckster and Tuivasa-Sheck. Nickel Kluckster actually did a very good job at centre for New Zealand in the Pacific Championships last year. He looked really comfortable and helped create some decent chances. Plus, do you really want to take Tuivasa-Sheck away from fullback? Especially with the amount of total meters he picks up every week. His returns are so dangerous, and in attacking positions, he's still a threat with his step. In the other centre position, they could swap between Leotawa and Berry as well if they want to. Both are fine options, and of course Capewell can also play there too. We've seen him play there a little bit last season, and he does a fine job. But I'm really excited to see Alafiana Khan-Pereira in this side. He's another one of my favourites in the NRL. He is rapid, and he's skillful. I think he could do some really good stuff in this side. But as mentioned at the start, the Warriors look really exciting this season. I just hope they can keep their best side as healthy as possible. At the very least, if they have to make changes, they're used to it from last season. And they've got some decent options, whether that's using Pompey, Berry, or Taupiki in the back line, or Martin or Boyd in the halves, or even Gannon in the back row. I do also hope Metcalf and Harris DeVita can grow their partnership this season. Both were instrumental to a lot of what the Warriors did well last year. Both also have a kicking game, short-range kicking game, and run game. They can control either side of the field and make the Warriors effective on both edges. Plus, with Egan through the middle, he's already in the conversation for top 5 hookers, but behind this pack, he could have a lot of fun this year. Now, this is another side that I can see injuries being the only reason why their season's derailed. That's it, just injuries. The squad is absolutely made for a final spot. At the very least, they should be in the finals. Andrew Webster has been getting a tune out of this side for the past few years as well. I think he's a very underrated head coach. And they just need to stay healthy. That's it. Keep building on what they did last year. They made big improvements from 24 to 25. They've just got to stay healthy and keep building on that. I think there's the potential they do something special this year. But for a floor, I'm going to go with 8th. For a ceiling, I'll go with 3rd. Next up, we have the North Queensland Cowboys. Let's take a look at their transfers out and transfers in. For players out, the list includes Reece Robson, Tom Duffy, Jordan McLean, Semi Valame, Jamal Shibasaki, Emali Batangane, and Carl Lawton. For players in, the list includes Reid Marnie, Ethan King, James Walsh, Matt Lodge, and Sonny Luke. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give the Cowboys a 5.5 out of 10. They have lost some big names in there with Robson, Duffy is good for rotation, McLean, Valame, and Lawton, but I think there's a few like-for-likes in there. Marnie is a good replacement for Robson. Lodge is a good replacement for the forwards they've missed if they get him playing regularly, and I think Sonny Luke is also a great backup option at 9. So for me, 5.5 out of 10. Now, the Cowboys had a rough year in 2025. They just didn't get firing. They had their moments, but it was few and far between, really. At the start of the season, I did think their back line looked quite underwhelming and that it would limit them in terms of points, which it did. One thing I've never had a problem with when it comes to the Cowboys is the pack and the spine. Both have always been pretty good. But starting with the back line, it will most likely consist of Burns, Labert, Purdue, and Taulangi. Although we might see Robert Darby get some games this season, we'll see. However, I'm not too sure what we'll see from the Cowboys on the right edge. I'm mostly confident about Jeremiah Nanai being their biggest threat on that side, unless Tom Dearden also usually plays on the right. But on the left, we saw Jackson Purdue making real progress throughout the season. He looks like a really exciting young prospect, and next to Taulangi, he is a quality winger with plenty of high-level experience already. That left edge does look decent. I'm assuming we'll also see Helam Lukey on the left edge as well, who could really do with some regular game time, and he's a player that could produce plenty of good moments for the Cowboys. We might also see Bateman and O'Donnell featuring in the back row throughout the season from time to time as well. But getting on to the big blokes in the forward pack though, they do look big enough to me. Hess, McIntyre and Tamalolo are solid props as we know. And I know McKaylee from his time at Warrington where he did a great job. Adding Matt Lodge to this pack is decent as well. It's not been smooth sailing for him over the past few seasons, but he's a big body and if his mind is right, he gets regular minutes, he can really contribute with strong carries. But with the rest of the big guys in the forward pack, I'll end with the two listed as the assumed starters, Cotter and Neem. I'm a big fan of Griffin Neem. I think he could be a real wrecking ball to start games. He can drag defenders and take multiple carries per set. And with Ruben Cotter, he's always a reliable option, whether it's for club, country or state. He's versatile as well, since he can play prop, back row, lock and maybe hooker at a push, but he will always put in a solid shift. When I was comparing all international props last year, he was the best performing prop compared to all other Aussie and England props in the Ashes. I was looking at meters per carry, tackles, tackle efficiency, tackle breaks, offloads and play the ball speed, all those areas that you want to look at for the props. Overall, Ruben Cotter was the best performer in those areas. But finally, the spine. On paper, this looks like one of the strongest spines in the league. If Drinkwater and Dearden link up more effectively this season, they'll do some serious damage. Now, Clifford isn't seen as a star in the NRL, but he has brought a decent amount of stability to the Cowboys kicking game. He can take on that responsibility, although Drinkwater doesn't mind getting involved in the kicking game either. And even though they have lost Robson, who's an 80-minute hooker, they've brought in Reid Marnie, who can do that job as well. He might come into the season with a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and when he's at his best, I think he's a potentially top 5 hooker in the NRL. He's also not far off State of Origin selection in my opinion, but it is hard to get in ahead of Ben Hunt and his new teammate Tom Dearden at 9. They've also signed Sonny Luke, who isn't listed in the assumed lineup, but I honestly think he's capable of starting for anyone. I really rate him, and I think he should be getting regular minutes. Now, the Cowboys did have the 16th ranked defence last season, so that is a concern, but their backline is at least the same. Getting more reps together, they could make some improvements in defence as the season goes on. But that spine looks great again, and it's playing behind a big pack that can compete and win battles through the middle. Like I've said with the Cowboys, I like the pack and I like the spine. It's just in the backline I'm not entirely sure about. Given the quality of players around this squad, there's no reason for me why they couldn't massively surprise some people this year and really compete for a top 8 spot. I don't think they'll be anywhere near the top end of the ladder, given how good a lot of other teams are in the comp this year. But if they get things clicking, they've got a pack that can drive them forward, they've got a spine that can create opportunities anywhere on the field, they could, at their best, do something fairly good this year. So for floor, I'm going to go with 12th, and for ceiling, I'll go with 7th. Next up, we have the most frustrating team that I've ever met in my entire life, the Parramatta Eels. Let's take a look at the players that they've lost and the players they've gained. For players out, the list includes Dylan Brown, Sean Lane, Zach Lomax, Brendan Hands, Dean Hawkins, Waramu Greg, Dan Keir and Hayes Dunster. For players in, the list includes Jack DeBellin, Jonah Pezzett and Brian Kelly. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give them a 4.5 out of 10. I think there are some options there that I don't mind them losing out on in terms of Hands, Hawkins, Greg, Keir and Dunster, but they've actually made some like-for-like changes. They've lost out on Lane and brought in DeBellin, so a bit of a change in the forwards. They've lost out on Brown, brought in Pezzett. Lost out on Lomax, brought in Kelly. So there's some like-for-likes, but I don't think the like-for-likes are as good as the guys they've lost. Now, the Eels have been a very frustrating team to watch over the last few years, not just for me, but especially for Para fans as well. They can be very hard to predict, and you just never know what team's going to show up week to week. But I do kind of like the makeup of this team. There are solid pieces all over, but are they as stacked as other teams? Not really. I do like the youth they have in their squad. I think Joash Papali could show some flashes of quality this season. Hopefully he gets some decent minutes to show it. Riley Smith has looked fairly nippy at a dummy half since he's been a regular in this side. He could take a big step up this season. Isaiah Iongi also got to show his quality last year. He does still have a lot to learn, and maybe isn't at a high enough level just yet to have a major impact, but he's only 22. He already looks like a decent player, and I believe he'll be there long term, so he's in a good place right now. But let's see what Jonah Pezzett can do this year. He's had a handful of NRL games already for a quality side in Melbourne Storm, and compared to the guys that they've had in the halves over the past few years, he didn't look massively out of place. It's just unfortunate he's only there for 1 year, but he'll be gaining a wealth of experience this season. Dylan Brown is a fairly big miss, but he's not irreplaceable. And as long as Pezzett can deliver something close to what Brown did for the Eels, I think he'll have done alright. I do like some of the pieces in the pack. I don't think it's a huge pack, unfortunately, though, but it is full of guys that will work hard and can get into the grind. Junior Barlow will be the biggest threat up front. He's solid for Para week in, week out. He'll be up front alongside Jermaine Hopgood, who's not the biggest prop, but he loves getting stuck in, and he will put in a shift. Joining them in the middle is Jack DeBellin, who does have a lot to offer. He's another hard-working forward who can take plenty of carries and will put in the hard work in defence. In the backline, there are some solid options for the Eels. Brian Kelly is a new addition. He'll be replacing Zach Lomax. Lomax is a major miss, though, especially in the air. He was able to make some freakish things happen on the wing. But Brian Kelly is still generally good in most areas. I think he'll be fine. He's next to Penasini, who I quite like. He's got pace and is usually reliable most weeks. On the opposite side, they have Russell and Addo-Carr. They can contribute to plenty of points this season and can create a fair few long-range tries this season. But there are still a few other guys that will feature and have an impact. I think Talon De Silva is a half-decent hooker, so he's not a bad option when needed. Matteson and Simonson might feature here and there, but can do a decent job when they're at their best. But I think Dylan Walker off the bench could be a really impactful player. I think he can come on late in games and keep the energy levels up. The final guy to talk about, though, is, of course, Mitchell Moses. He does kind of stick out like a sore thumb in this lineup, to be honest. Hopefully he can stay healthy all season. The Eels really need him to be healthy. He's a guy that can carry Parramatta to a new level. He's got one of the best kicking games in the comp. He's got a killer cutout pass. He's pacey with a quick step as well, and he's capable of breaking any defensive line. Overall, I think this is a side that could at least be about average in attack and defence. With Iongi going into this season as a more experienced player, he can offer a little bit more in attack this year than he did last year. But I do think their head coach, Jason Riles, was starting to get a tune out of this side towards the back end of last season. He is respected as a coach by a lot of people, and they back him to do a good job at the Eels. This is a team that I'm pretty sure is going to love the grind. And if they do, it's going to be really good for field position, given the distance that Mitchell Moses can get on his kicks. They get teams pinned back, they love the grind through the middle, and they keep teams as far back as possible and get plenty of decent attacking territory later on in games. And they can really apply pressure on teams inside the red zone a lot. I'm not expecting a massively improved Eels side this year, but I do think from what Jason Riles has been able to do, we could see them at least a little bit better offensively and a little bit better defensively as well. But all that accumulates over the course of the season. They just need the consistency as well for all 27 rounds, and I think they could do something fairly good this year. They could be quite frustrating for some teams to play against. But for a floor, I'm going to go with 13th. For a ceiling, I'll go with 8th. Next up, we have the Penrith Panthers. Let's take a look at the players that they've lost and the players they've gained. For players out, the list includes Maverick Geyer, Brad Schneider, Luke Summerton, Dane Laurie, Trent Tolo, and Sonny Luke. For players in, the list includes Jack Cogger, Tom Arley, Kalani Going, and Freddie Lussick. For a transfer rating, I'll give the Panthers a 5 out of 10. They've lost a couple decent rotational options in Geyer, Schneider, Summerton, Laurie, and especially Luke. I did say before I do really like Sonny Luke, so I think it's a shame they've lost him. But at the very least, they've brought in some other decent rotational options, especially with Cogger, Arley, and Lussick. I think Cogger is actually a decent pickup. He's already got a lot of NRL experience as a starting 7. He's likely to come off the bench as the hooker, as the relief hooker, but can also play in the halves as well, and he's already familiar with the club. So I'll say 5 out of 10. Now, I think we should all know by now, you should never underestimate the Panthers. As late as round 12 last season, they were in last place on the ladder. One major win straight later, and they're back in the conversation for winning 5 titles in a row. And their starting lineup is going into 2026 completely unchanged. They've got a forward pack that loves the grind, can win the grind, and can bully some teams through the middle. Leota is actually underrated in my opinion. He doesn't look like one of the biggest props, but he can run hard and he's got some decent speed as well, which helps him with line breaks. Next to Lindsay Smith, who's another NRL workhorse, they can compete with anyone. Yet, they're still helped by other quality forwards. Liam Martin has a ridiculous engine. He's just non-stop every week, both in attack and defence. He just keeps going at 100%. Papali'i is a bigger body, but will use it and move defenders. And then there's Isaiah Yeo through the middle. To many, the best 13 in the game. He's an elite hybrid at 13. Not only can he carry the ball really well and still find an offload, but he's technically efficient as well. When the Panthers need to shift the ball across the park, he moves the ball so cleanly and draws defenders in as well. He can also play first receiver if needed, which frees up Talangi and Cleary to get involved later in the attacking shape. And with those two, starting with Blaise Talangi, he just kept gradually getting better and better throughout last season. He started connecting with teammates more effectively, he began to take control of his side of the field and was creating more opportunities. He was exactly the same for Samoa in the Pacific Championships as well. At such a young age, he's developing really quickly. But of course, he's alongside Nathan Cleary in the halves, seen as one of the best players in the game to many, which is very hard to disagree with, at least at club level anyway. It doesn't help sometimes when he's out with an injury in periods of the season, because that does seem to happen every single year, but he's also another Panthers player that'll be missing due to state of origin. But when he's available, it's so hard to go against him because he changes games. Just when you think he couldn't contribute more to a game, he does. Whether it's with a pass, a grubber kick, a 40-20 to change momentum, a step, a conversion, or a drop goal, he just shows up. But I will end with the fullback and the back line. Dylan Edwards is one of the best fullbacks in the game. He's great for his returns. He's usually reliable in defence as well. And he's a major threat all by himself in the red zone. In the back line, I initially thought I'd swap McLean and Alamotti, since Alamotti has looked more comfortable at centre and McLean is quality in both positions. But for me, whichever position means that McLean gets his hands on the ball more, I think is the most important thing there. He's developed so quickly, and he's already shown he can create so many chances by himself. He's so dangerous from inside the red zone, and a quality finisher, and he's really good in the air too. They've got a guy like that on the other side as well, though, in Brian Toto. For his height, he's solid in the air offensively. It's a slight hindrance in defence sometimes, but he can make up for it with his defensive stops. But he's so important with his yardage carries out the backfield. He can get the Panthers on the front foot early in sets. He's next to Isaac Tango. They could create plenty of chances together with the speed that they've got and the connection they've built over the last few years. They've even got Tom Jenkins coming through as well. He looked really, really comfortable when he was rotating last year. He's a solid one for the future. But I am expecting the Panthers to be a well-oiled machine again this year, and I don't think they'll have the same start again as they did last year. For me, this is another team where I can only really see their season derailed by injuries or origin selection. That's it. But for this year, I imagine that they'll just be on it from the start. Given that the team is unchanged, they're in such great form towards the back end of last year, I don't think they'll have their initial struggles. You could understand it last year, given how important Luai was and losing him, and trying to get Jack Cole up to speed, or Blaise Talangi up to speed. You could understand the initial issues, But I don't think there'll be any of those problems to start the season. I think they'll be a real threat and could possibly pick up another title this year. So for a floor, I'm going to go with 4th place. For a ceiling, I'll go with 1st. Next up, we have the South Sydney Rabbitohs. Let's take a look at the players that they've lost and the players they've brought in. For players out, the list includes David Moale, Hazen Mellors, Michaeli Ravalawa, Ben Lovett, Jacob Host, Saliva Havili, Shakai Mitchell, Fletcher Myers, Jerome Burns, Josh Schuster, and Lewis Dodd. For players in, the list includes Moala Graham Taufa, Branson Garlick, Jonah Glover, Ed Cossey, Latrell Sequalt, John Riddell, David Fafita, and Adam Elliott. For the Rabbitohs, I'm going to give them a 4 out of 10 for a transfer rating. I think they've lost a good handful of squad players or guys that can have an impact in Moale, Ravalawa, Host, and Havili. The guys they brought in, I think David Fafita is a decent option, maybe Adam Elliott. Ed Cossey, we'll see. Garlick is maybe okay. Nothing spectacular. I think they've lost maybe a few too many decent options and not replaced them with enough quality. But the first thing to mention is that the Rabbitohs had to deal with a lot of major injuries last season. There were a lot of rotations and it was very tough to get settled. That being said, I'm not entirely convinced about this side. I think the backs look fantastic. There's no worries there at all, and I'll get onto them in a bit, but I am worried about the forwards. Sure, Totola, Kalamatangi, Aitken, Arrow, Murray, and all of the squad players for the forwards are hard workers, they're good players, but I'm really worried that they just aren't big enough. I think they're really lacking size. Like, Kalamatangi is a quality player, but in the back row or lock, is he really going to be able to dominate in the front row? I don't know. Aitken and Arrow, again, are hard workers, but are they going to get the bunnies up the field? Again, I don't know. Now, of course, having Cam Murray back is huge. Let's hope he stays fit. He's another guy that's got an insane engine and will work his backside off, but he's not getting the bunnies up the field. He's not doing that. And I don't know about the rest of the forwards throughout the squad either, but I hope they can prove me wrong, because it's been a rough few years for the Rabbitohs and a bit of success would be good. But yeah, I do hope I'm wrong there. But on to the major, absolutely major positive, the backs. That back line is as good as any other in the league. Johnston is a try-scoring machine. Jack Whiten is a very calm, smart and experienced player. And with Latrell Mitchell in the centre as well, if he can get back to his best and stay healthy, he could be a dominant force on the edges. Finally, with Campbell Graham, he's another player that's had injury problems, but he's such a skillful player at centre or on the wing. He's a great finisher, a major threat from inside the 10. He can find the line himself, he can work in tight spaces, and he's good in the air too, given his height. That back line is sorted. The spine is an interesting one though. I don't mind Brandon Smith. I think he's fine, but it's always debated whether he's a 9 or a 13. If he has the right attitude this season, he can contribute to the Bunnies in 2026. In the halves, we'll see Walker and Humphreys together again. We all know how good Cody Walker can be at his best. In attacking positions, he can create opportunities with his grubber kicks or run game. But for Humphreys, I knew barely anything about him last season. I was sure he was a 9, but for a lot of last season, he looked really confident and level-headed at 7. He had a fairly decent kicking game as well, which surprised me, and I think he could be a solid option, and with another preseason of those two together, that could help them kick on this year. But this season could be absolutely massive for Jai Gray. We saw him a little bit in 2024. He looked exciting, but last season, he was one of the most informed players in the whole league for the first, let's say, third of the season. He was at the top or near the top of the Dalian rankings for a while. He's a reliable fullback with a wicked step and loads of pace. He's going to be so annoying for defenders to deal with, given how quickly he can change direction, spot a gap, and just go. Overall, again, I hope I'm wrong about the pack. Even if I'm right, I think the backs are full of more than enough quality to kind of make up for any deficits up front. If those backs are firing on all cylinders from round one, or can find their rhythm early on, they could make some waves this season. Again, I do hope I'm wrong about the pack, and you guys might disagree with me too. That's completely fine. It's just my opinion. I'm slightly concerned. When it comes to the backs, I've got absolutely no concerns with this group, and also given their head coach as well, he's not going to accept a lack of effort, is he? So at the very least, they might be able to enjoy the grind through the middle. They might be solid defensively too. If they're well drilled, they might have the right attitude. Those kind of things might make up for the deficits in the pack that I'm a little bit concerned about. Again, I might be completely wrong about the pack. I hope I'm wrong about the pack. But with the backs they've got, they could find plenty of points this season. And they could have a decent year. I hope they have a decent year. They just need to stay healthy. For a floor, I'm going to go with 13th, but for a ceiling, I'll go with 8th. Next up, we have the St. George Illawarra Dragons. Let's take a look at the players that they've lost and the players they've gained. For players out, the list includes Jonah Glover, Sione Finau, Cody Ramsey, Jack DeBellin, Lachlan Ilias, and David Clemmer. For players in, the list includes Daniel Atkinson, Josh Kerr, David Farley, Setu Tu, and Joseph O'Neill. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give them a 5.5 out of 10. I don't think they've lost anyone that important. I don't think they've gained anyone that important. But the reason why it's leaning more positively with a 5.5 is because I do like Josh Kerr. They have lost some options in the forwards, but I think he is possibly a bigger strike option through the middle. So I'm leaning more towards a 5.5 out of 10. Unfortunately, I'm not blown away by the Dragons squad, but there are a handful of players that I like that I think could have an impact or make a difference this season. 3 of those are all players they brought in last season, which made me think the Dragons were really trying to be a serious team. That's Gutherson, Holmes, and Cook. All 3 are quick and experienced players, and they'll work hard. But I feel that at least Gutherson and Cook are let down by the other options in the spine. I don't think Flanagan is as disastrous as people make out, but he's not the kind of player that's going to win you titles. He's just not, and certainly not alongside Daniel Atkinson. I get wanting something fresh in the halves, but surely you just start with King Tongia in the halves again and let him develop, or you actually spend some decent money on a quality 6 or 7. But I do like some other options that are dotted around. Sloan seems to have found a decent home on the wing, which is good for him. He looks like he can have a decent impact there. Sulian and Tuipulotu made some decent things happen last season, so maybe they can get something going again on that left edge. But I do think the inclusion of Josh Kerr through the middle is really important. When he came off the bench for the Dolphins last season, he was huge. He gives the Dragons much needed punch through the middle. Jaden Sewer is usually reliable as well every week, but I think Hamish Stewart could have a real breakout season this year. He looks like he's got the tools for it. And one of the positives that I can say about the Dragons is that in a fair few games last season, they dealt with a lot of pressure in defence early on in games. They dealt with an onslaught of attack, but kept teams out, and then would march up the field to put up the first points of the game. That mindset is within this team. It's within their DNA somewhere, but at the same time, they're under that kind of pressure for so long because they couldn't compete through the middle, and they didn't have a kicking game to get them out of trouble, or they couldn't find line breaks out wide. That would keep them pinned back for so long, but it would take a few good sets after dealing with that pressure, and then they could punish teams. But again, I'm not blown away by this squad. It feels like they're a new NRL team that blew their cap on Gutherson, Holmes and Cook, and then took kind of whatever they could from what was left of other teams. It's a little bit underwhelming. Now, as much as I have my concerns about this squad, I must acknowledge that there are plenty of elements in this squad that have flair. They can produce these great off-the-cuff moments from time to time, but it's a little bit too few and far between, in my opinion. I think they all tend to work hard. They can put in a good shift, but they're just kind of lacking quality throughout a season. Once they start playing against good sides and great sides, it's very rare that they show up on those big occasions. They have done sometimes over the past couple of years, but you don't always know what you're going to get against teams on their level. And then when it's against a good team or a great team, it's very difficult for them to really compete. So I've got my concerns for them. For a floor, I'm going to go with 17th. For a ceiling, I'm going to go with 11th. Next up, we have the Sydney Roosters. Let's take a look at the players they've lost and the players they've brought in. For players out, the list includes Brandon Smith, Sandon Smith, Zach Docker-Clay, Ethan King, Ethan Roberts, and Xavier Vea. For players in, the list includes Dally Cherry-Evans, Reece Robson, Cody Ramsey, and Tommy Talau. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give the Roosters a solid 8 out of 10. Now, the guys they've lost are solid rotational options. I think both Smith players, Docker-Clay, they're good for rotations. But they've brought in some even better replacements. I think Cody Ramsey, if he gets settled there, could be a great rotational option as well. And same with Tommy Talau in that back line. So for me, I think they've had the best transfer window of 2026. Sydney Roosters get an 8 out of 10. Now, the Roosters were another side that had their injury concerns last season, which caused them to make a lot of changes, especially in the spine. But this year, they easily have one of the strongest looking squads in the league. Starting with the spine, as I said, they had to move some things around last season. We saw Sam Walker, Sandon Smith, Hugo Savala, and Connor Watson. We might have seen some others as well have stints in the halves, and they somehow made it work fairly well, regardless of the partnerships that they had to go with. This season, Sam Walker will be joined by Daly Cherry-Evans. This is a very solid partnership at 6 and 7. DCE can control the kicking game and organisation, which massively frees up Sam Walker to be the tricky off-the-cuff halfback we all know he can be. His step isn't too bad either, but he can also create chances on either edge, and his short kicking game is actually one of the best in the game. Then there's James Tedesco. He goes into another season as the Roosters' number 1. He's always a reliable option and sometimes underappreciated by the rest of the league. But defensively, he can be important, and with his return carries, he helps massively in getting his side on the front foot. Plus, when it comes to heads-up footy, he is one of the best in the league as well. But the Roosters have now brought in Reece Robson. That's one area where they've been slightly lacking in recent years, but they've now got a state of origin hooker who could easily do 80 minutes. He's quick out of dummy half, and he gets through a lot of defensive work. So the Roosters' spine looks elite this season. Now the backs are consistent again this season as well, with Billy Smith next to Daniel Tupou. Smith normally has quite a calm head and can certainly find a line break or two, and Daniel Tupou has been reliable for a very long time now. He's an excellent finisher, an aerial threat, and he's solid for yardage carries early in sets too. And on the other side, we'll see Robert Toya and Mark Nwangani-Tuaze again. One of the most surprising elements of the 2025 season in both Super League and the NRL, Toya came out of absolutely nowhere for me and established himself as a very capable NRL centre in just, 10 rounds or so? He seems to have a calm head in possession, he knows how to find the line himself from inside the red zone, and in defence, I can't even tell you how many times he shut down players in 1v1s. Good players, great players in 1v1s, including Latrell Mitchell in State of Origin. And it's those kind of qualities that earned him a State of Origin call-up in the first place. But next to him is Nwangani-Tuaze. He massively impressed me last season. I believe he had some games at centre early on, but he eventually found his home on the wing and was a freak of nature. Some of the tries he scored or assisted were ridiculous. He's a very good finisher and was possibly the most dominant player in the air last year. And that's compared to guys like Coates and Lomax. Nwangani-Tuaze was just as good, if not better, in my opinion, in the air. But the Roosters forward pack, once again, looks great. Leniu and Collins are two really strong ball runners. They're happy to give and take hits and keep going. They'll be huge in early stints. Leniu is also very mobile as well. Now, Fahu White was the best performing international forward last year. I listed him as my international prop of the year. He's getting better and better year after year. He can drag multiple defenders and still get an offload or quick play the ball. He's also a player that defenders need to be careful of right in front of the try line because he can crash over. But there are plenty of other squad players throughout the Roosters that are showing their worth in the forwards. Natanigan Butcher, Wong, Steep, Foketi, they're all capable of putting in gritty shifts through the middle. But the final players to talk about are Angus Crichton, for one, who is an offloading machine. He attracts multiple defenders and still moves them, and somehow finds offloads as well. He usually runs good lines for grubber kicks too, for his halfback. We might also see him crash over for some tries this year too. Another is Victor Radley. He's another player with a massive engine. He's just non-stop. Not the biggest of forwards, as we know, but will launch himself into every carry, and he'll happily get involved with a ton of defensive work. But finally, I've spoken about guys like this for other teams, impact players off the bench. For me, you cannot find much better than Connor Watson. I am a massive fan of this guy. He is a no-nonsense, quality, hard-working player. He can play at 9, 13, or in the halves. Wherever he's needed, he'll come on and do a solid job on both sides of the ball. And his attitude is always professional. I don't know what he's like in training, but from what I see on the pitch and how he conducts himself, we always talk about culture in rugby league. And if I'm building a brand new team and I need to instill the right culture, Connor Watson is one of my first options. In the last few years, the Roosters might have had slow starts or dips throughout the season, but towards the back end of the season, you can always be sure that they'll find some form. They'll find a rhythm, they'll start clicking, they'll be able to demolish some teams. They just seem to hit the ground running at the right time, and they're always there or thereabouts when they need to be. With the experience, the size, the speed, the quality all over this squad, plus the coaching staff they've got, I think they should be able to hit the ground running early on and maintain that consistency, given the quality and experience throughout the squad. If they won it all, it wouldn't surprise me that much, given how good this squad looks. So for a floor, I'm going to go with 4th, but for a ceiling, I'll go with 1st. Finally, for the NRL 2026 season preview, we have the West Tigers. Let's take a look at the players that they've lost and the players they've gained. For players out, the list includes Solomon Afartape, Josh Felady, Alex Lobb, Justin Matamua, Brent Naden, Ruben Porter, Charlie Staines and Brandon Tumeth. For players in, the list includes Kai Pearce-Paul, Jock Madden, Javen Andrews, Maverick Gaia, Ethan Roberts and Bunty Afoa. For a transfer rating, I'm going to give the Tigers a somewhat solid 6.5 out of 10, which is pretty good compared to the rest of the league from what I've given them. I don't mind the players that they've lost out on. I mean, I kind of liked Fartape and Staines a little bit, but I don't think they're major losses. Neither of the other guys, really. But for players that they've brought in, there's decent options in the forwards. There's a little bit of versatility in the halves too. So, overall, not a bad window from the Tigers. 6.5 out of 10. Now, for the last few years, the Tigers have been picking up wooden spoons, have been really enjoying that, but they got themselves up to 11th in 2025. I think we could all tell they were really showing their intent with the signings that they made last season, and a lot of us probably saw the work and togetherness that they showed in their pre-season campaign. I know they put some videos out. They looked really well connected, and it paid off in a big way. Now, it's about getting some stability and consistency in that side, because they had to make a few changes last season. One thing they had to try and figure out later last year was the spine, but on the team listed by the NRL over on the right-hand side, I'd agree that their strongest spine is Bula, Luai, Dewey and Coruscant. Bula seems to be getting gradually better each year. Coruscant is one of the league's best nines, and he's always reliable and dangerous. But then the Tigers started to play Luai and Dewey in the halves together late last year, and it looked like they'd found their best partnership after losing Lachlan Galvin. But now those two, they get a full pre-season together. Dewey takes so much pressure off Luai, and it allows Jerome Luai to focus on the run game and creating chances. He's a player that can really elevate the Tigers. In broken play, he's such a major threat, but his kicking game as well is also getting better year on year. There's still a decent amount of firepower in the pack. Paulet, Twal and Seyfarth are all solid options, but the inclusion of Bunty Afoa, if he can stay fit, is pretty good. He's quite erratic when he carries the ball and can be a handful for defenders to bring him down or slow him down. Royce Hunt can be a major impact player off the bench. He's absolutely massive, but Terrell May was a major standout last season. Not only was he dragging multiple defenders, but he was constantly getting offloads, which allowed the Tigers to get further up the field more easily, and it suited Jerome Luai and even Jareem Bula in broken play. Then there's Kai Pearce-Paul. He hasn't blown people away since joining the NRL, but I think that's a decent deal for both parties. He's a guy that will put in a solid defensive shift for one, but with how the Tigers play, getting offloads and playing off the cuff, I think he could really enjoy his footy here and can really contribute to the West Tigers. So for me, the forward pack looks quite solid, but the backline also looks solid too. Toa has a decent amount of NRL experience, and I think he's fine. Taruva is a very reliable winger, good finisher, decent defensive player too, and for his height, he's not bad in the air either. Skelton on the opposite wing is still a decent finisher as well. He's also not afraid to put in a big hit in defence too. Plus, there's a stockiness to him which makes him valuable for yardage carries as well. But I will say, since Taylon May came into the Tigers, he's helped to elevate them a little bit as well. If he can get some consistent minutes, he stays settled in a decent team, he could really thrive and cause a lot of damage over on the left-hand side for the Tigers. Now, my biggest concern with the Tigers is just being able to control games with their kicking, but I think they'll be at least slightly better in that area this season, with Dewey taking on that responsibility and Luai at least getting better in that department year after year. Plus, I'm still not sure whether Benji Marshall is the guy to get them to the finals as head coach. I think this squad is capable of top 8, and at the very least, last season they took a big step in the right direction, but I'm just a little bit unsure at the moment with the head coach. I do think that if the Tigers lean into the identity of throwing the ball around, changing direction, constant offloads, playing off the cuff, I think that could really suit them this year, and they could do some good stuff, at least offensively. We do know that they've had their defensive issues over the past few years, we all know this, but with a regular backline and not a massively changed team overall, they can still build on those defensive structures. The backline was relatively the same for most of the back end of last year, So they've built that connection. They get a full preseason together again, and they can start a fresh year, hopefully with a better defence behind them. But I think it's just about staying healthy. Consistency is good for the rest of the year. Hopefully they don't have a massive fall off. I think they could be an improved side. They are already taking good steps with the signings they've made last year and this year. I think we could see at least another step. I don't know if it's going to be as big a step, but I think the improvements will compound and they will make at least another step. For a floor, I will go with 15th, but for a ceiling, I will go with 10th. I think they could be pushing for top 8. I don't think they'll quite make it, but I think they could at least be somewhat in the range of finals by the end of the year. So there you have my NRL 2026 season preview. So just to be clear, all players in and out are currently up to date at the time of recording. I've taken everything from the NRL signings tracker, so that's where I'm getting all my information from, and the squads as well. If anything's wrong, I do apologise, but I've checked as much as I can. But I do want to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Who do you think is going to win the minor premiership? Who do you think is going to win the title this year? Who do you think is getting the wooden spoon? Let me know your opinions on this season, or your opinions on any of the 17 squads competing this year in the NRL. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. But as always, if you enjoyed, feel free to leave a like. It does help to get the video out there to more people. Subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with more Kinetic Rugby League content. And if you'd like to become a member of the channel, you can do by clicking the link in the description down below. That's going to be it. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.